Voltie, how are you?
I'm good, Angus. For those of you who don't know, my name is Voltie. As Angus said, I am a content creator for 7 I make videos on YouTube, write articles for the website, and also stream my tournament series on Twitch, usually once, twice a week. So you can check me out in a bunch of different ways if you want. But otherwise, for the most part, I'm kind of just here as the girl in the chair today.
Yeah, it's nice to have the privilege to have you on the other side of the mic, you know. Yeah, no, I appreciate you joining us, and you also did footage for that event. I've linked it in the chat, of course. People can check it out at their leisure. You did it. It was great. It was a very cool event to be able to capture footage for, and you did both days as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. So Plenty of Games held a team trios event where the winners won a Savannah each on the Saturday, and then a winner Library of Alexandria event on the Sunday, which was singles. So I was at POG for I think 27 hours over the course of that weekend, open to close both days, and we ran live coverage and commentary on the Saturday. Unfortunately, tech issues did run into us on Sunday. So we only got live commentary on the first and second round. However, I have spent 20 hours ish re-recording commentary for any of the ones that were scuffed over the course of that weekend. They're currently sitting with my editor, so they should be coming out hopefully by the weekend. I think that's when she gave me a heads up that that would happen. But yeah, it was a fun event. It was a lot of work, but it was good to see people. It was good to see the room full and vibrant and exciting. Um, and yeah, I mean, commentary is great.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, you did.
yeah,
It was good. It was really good, and it was cool. And I appreciated actually also just having a go of playing because it's like sometimes you get caught in that loop and you're like, oh, like wouldn't mind just playing Magic as well. But yeah, so that was a lot of fun. So this was oh, I guess before we start, of course, if you're watching us right now, you're watching us at twitch.tv/CBRMTG. If you're watching us later, you'll be watching us on YouTube. We upload all of our VODs on youtube.com/CBRMTG. You absolutely have to check out Voltie's channel and subscribe if you haven't already. She's premier 7 content creator at the moment, and it's a pleasure to work alongside her today. Otherwise, if you've never heard of 7 Highlander before, you're coming in the right place. Check out the website, 7highlander.com.au. We have a wonderful Discord and wonderful community, and yeah, and people are hungry for data analysis. People like the idea of it, I think. So, as a service to the community, let's break it down together.
yeah.
um,
Service to the community is pretty apt. I mean, it previously we've had rough ideas of what data was coming out from events, but otherwise each of the areas of Australia were pretty insulated, and you would kind of hear rough feedback filter through, and you'd have a general idea of what people were playing. But uh, yeah, I mean, since I got onto the committee, I decided that I really wanted to make it very visible what people were playing, what was doing well, and so expect to see plenty more of these streams, expect to see plenty more of those videos and articles. Every now and then, I imagine I'll be popping in with Angus, although they do prefer to have the winner of the event, which is incredibly reasonable and nice to have a bit of community facing there.
mm. It's been a tough one. I like having really qualified people to talk to, but also like I had one of the people that I asked. I was like the first time that I reached out to someone who I didn't know already. I was just like, hey, I like usually do this thing. He's like, oh, I watched it previously and I'd love to do it. So it's like it kind of was like exciting to do that with someone who's like, oh, I've won and now I can like talk about it or whatever. Because some people are like really into meta analysis and really being like, what can I like? How can I eke out those edges? So yes, unlucky to not have the first winner of 2025 in the spot, but very extremely lucky to have Voltie in that spot as well. So yeah, let's break it down. So as we see, plenty of games. Victoria 5th of January 2025, first one. So happy 2025, everyone. 81 players, 7 rounds, top 8, and we played it all the way out to the end. Now, this is actually a pretty common thing for Melbourne. Melbourners, they like to play it out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a regional thing. I think it was more that a lot of the people who made it into top 8 are the kinds of people who don't do splits very often. I mean, you can see there it's Brennan, Riley, Jack, and Juzza. They've all played on PTs. They've all played PTs pretty recently. And, splitting a library is just kind of difficult.
Yeah.
Like you can get it chopped into cash, but I know Brennan personally did actually want a library because it would justify him playing some terrible Miracles decks. And so when we got to the finals, it was 10 o'clock or 10:30 or something. And I asked the players, like, what are we doing about this? And they're like, no split, let's bash it out. And they were completely exhausted, but ship it,
Yeah.
It was great.
Do you think that's, I mean, as you mentioned in the stream, it was like, we've been doing this for like 11 hours. We've been doing this for 12 hours, playing, and like Brennan's playing Breach, and he's been playing Breach all day. Do you think there is like a reasoning for picking combo to beat that time slot that you have to beat?
I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot of equity to be gained when you're choosing your deck for a 7-point event, especially depending on what your goals are. So if, for example, you want to cash the event, you want to, get a positive record, then it makes sense to pick something fairer where you have more decisions and you have more influence over the game. If you're looking to spike the event, then you typically want to have a more polarized EV spread, where you just hope to dodge some of your bad matchups and get lucky in some of your good ones. I don't think that each of the macro archetypes in 7-point lends themselves to changing that tournament EV, especially the time EV. Although in saying that, there are decks that will finish rounds quicker. So if you value shorter breaks, if you value having a lunch break, then those decks might be something that you would gravitate towards. But in terms of playing tired and expecting that your opponent is playing tired, it balances out in the end that it's not super important and not super impactful. Realistically, your best bet is to play something that you're comfortable with if you expect to make it to the late games, the late rounds of a tournament, because as your brain starts shutting off and you get tired and you think about all the sleep that you could be getting, your autopilot kicks in, and as long as you've been playing the deck enough, you should be able to get, you don't need to get back into the game and win the game on autopilot. You need to function for a couple of turns or a couple of minutes while your brain resets, and then you can start focusing again.
Yeah, totally. I see it. And it is interesting that in the end, like, people can try and gain whatever advantage, but I mean, for me, it's always like, I would just tell people to like, just play the thing that you like and you're comfortable with. I think liking is important because people are just like, well, if I'm going to play for 10 hours, like I played Green Black Pox and it was not very good. I think it was like 1 and 4 and 2, and it was like pretty embarrassing, but I had so much fun, because it was like I was doing flashy things and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, a lot of people do it for a lot of reasons, but I think longevity is like, it does become a game of attrition. So finding ways that you can sort of game that longevity issue is good. Quick breakdown of what we see in front of us. Lurrus Breach, Grixis Midrange, Reanimator ×2, Grixis ×2. Team of Midrange, Nadu, Walks and Shops in the top 8. And I don't know, I see Rug every now and then. I see Grixis all the time. It's like, you're usually like always 2 Grixis, and that's like kind of normal just because Grixis is doing well and blah, 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 and it like has been pointed recently, but like, I don't know. This is not too dissimilar, except for the fact that there's 2 Reanimator decks in the top 8. Like, this is not too dissimilar from what I've seen before.
Yeah, I mean, this top 8 was full of ringers. They were all playing decks that they understood. It is worth noting that Riley and Justin's decks were different. Riley was playing Lutri and Justin forwent it for 7 other points. But in terms of, a metagame breakdown, this is pretty much a bit of everything that you would expect. Not having any base white decks or any base initiative decks is probably, for the most part, it'd be due to the recent pointings, but it is also a metagame thing. Melbourne has been moving away from that over time, And obviously, this wasn't a big enough event to drag people out from Adelaide and from Brisbane. So, for the most part, it was Melbourneers, a Sydney group, and a Canberra group.
Yeah.
And then I think there was a Ballarat group.
Yeah, yeah, and it was a full day. So 81 players as you see in front of us, but like that's a good data set. Like we're going to be doing lots of comparison to RC7 because it wasn't the last one, but we had the Good Games Winner Duel and it was like kind of small data set, but like I love a big juicy one. RC was like 100 plus players and this one's like 80, so it's like you actually get to get a good idea of the meta. Like better data is good. I think we see on the right hand side metagame share, which is just the percentage, how many people were playing Nadu Walks in the field. So if you like compare it to modern or something where it's like maybe it's 12 or it's 13 or whatever, 7.4 is actually quite low, which is probably something to hang our hat on. But win share is in comparison to that, it's the 29 people made a positive win record. 37% in fact of people made a standard win, made it into the top 29. And so we can compare the win share throughout the day as well of those decks. And those with a positive win share, it just stands to reason that you make up only 7.4% of the meta, but you make up 10.3% of the winning decks. So from that, we can say that Grix has performed well, Jund, Nadu Walks performed well as usual. Reanimator, probably about the same. I think that's like region of error of 0.5 or whatever, so probably about the same. Flash Hog half, which is a bit of a drop. Shops had a good win share. The rest is probably more or less. And we have measured this in the past of just like rogue decks. These are ones that had 2 or less, and 2 or less people, and they made up 49. So that's kind of cool. It's like half the decks is just like 1 or 2 copies, which is pretty broad. But again, just a little bit of a drop in the win share, but probably nothing to extrapolate from that.
Yeah, nothing major. I mean, it was 81 players, which is a decently big event. But a lot of the grinders gravitated to more established archetypes, your Reanimator, your Grixis, your Walkers. But because those decks were being piloted by people who have played a lot of the format and kept up, we can see that they picked up more of the win percentage overall. I mean, Shops is continually getting carried by Thomas Bott down in Melbourne. Walks is continually getting carried by Michael Billinghurst. So, those two definitely going to help boost their archetypes whenever they register them. Realistically, not too much to gain from here. I think we would have to see a much bigger differential between any of these numbers for it to be quote unquote notable.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that we see a bunch of mid-range or mid-range combo decks do well and Shops do well is the small takeaway.
Yeah, for sure. Here's our wonderful top 8, by the way. What a great group. Yeah, very very nice. I like the human aspect of it as well. Like we look at a lot of data, but yeah. So congratulations to our top 8 pictured here, and like yeah, as you said, lots of familiar Melbourne faces, of course. Wonderful. Okay, so moving on. Most played pointed cards. Force of Will, usually at the top. We have comparison from RC7, 36.3 moves to 34, probably about the same. I think Fourth Aerolingus took a bit of a nosedive. Could just be Melbourne, could just be people are not playing red-white anymore. Anything else you see out here that's like worth noting?
So in terms of the overall cards, I think the classic 1-point cards that can show up in a couple of different shells, so Force of Will, Deathrite, Reanimate, even Urza Saga and Ancient Tomb, those are like the bigger ones that we see across multiple events because they can go into a couple of different decks. The main things to note from this particular sheet from the previous events is the uptick of blue cards and the downtick of red cards. So Fable still showed up, and it's gone down in terms of its play rate since it picked up its point, but it's still being played. But the cards around red white, so Fourth Earlingus, White Plume Adventurer, Broadside, a lot of those have taken hits where they were doing very well previously, and that was a very targeted pointing with the Foundation's points update. Red white was taking up a very large percent of the metagame. The best the most played non-land cards had like Fury and Fable and Lightning Bolt, and they were all like top 5 and pushing out things like Ponder and Preordain.
Yeah.
And so now we can see a shift here to blue or blue X cards. So Frog's picked up Bowmasters, which is ostensibly a blue card, Nadu, and Snapcaster even. Snapcaster was definitely one of those cards that was always outside of that range, and it's still kind of floating around. So when people talk about depointing Snapcaster, I think it's interesting because it does still see play, and people still pay the point for it. But yeah, it's mainly the downtick of red cards and the uptick of blue X cards.
Yeah.
I don't expect Force and Deathrite and Reanimate to be unseated anytime soon. But you know, there's possibilities, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the only other thing that I would throw out there is like the 13. I mean, this is when we're just looking at most play pointed cards. Like Nadu is not a one-trick pony. Like I saw it in like 4 or 5 different archetypes. I just saw like Nadu combo. It's obviously a Nadu walks, which is like unseeded Omnath walks. In some cases, I think half people were playing Omnath and half people were just playing Bant, you know? So it's interesting how these like things evolve, but like, yeah, Nadu, not a one-trick pony. Definitely not. But yeah, it seems safe and fair. I think that Fable still being like top 6 or whatever is funny. It's like people don't mind. They're like pretty happy to pay the point for Fable by the looks of it. Lovely.
Yeah, and I think in the top 5, having the two of the most recent pointed cards is notable and does reflect that our decision was likely correct. You know, obviously people were initially against pointing Fable just because it was a glue staple of the format. But if people are willing to pay a point for it, then it probably is point worthy. And Psychic Frog is a thing that we were aware was going to happen. Depending on how CanCon goes, I might even keep it on my personal watch list to 2, because that card is very, very good. But having 2 of those in the top 5 is noteworthy for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, still like lots of new cards in this list as well. Like there's very few that have been around for a really long time. Strip Mine, maybe for the first time actually being on this list because, you know, went down to 1. Went down to 1 recently as well. And it's not warping the format. People are just like, I've got 1 point left. I don't want to play Strip Mine at 2, but I'd be happy to play Wasteland. And then you're just like, oh, a little upgrade. But it's like, yeah, it's cool. It's interesting. I'm like not too worried about this at all. I heard people complaining about Nadu a lot, but I don't know. Sometimes it's like Leovold. Sometimes it's like, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Points by descending, and you've spoken about this a lot in your like your like shorter videos that come out much earlier, like the week of, is that points by descending is just sort of like the value of a point, you know. So in this is like the stark contrast, I guess, is that Lure is still highly valued, you know. The people rated it quite highly, and these are the ones that have sort of Time Walk and Lurus have been the ones that have sort of broken through the Force of Will, Deathrite, Reanimate, Psychic Frog, Fable sort of block, you know?
Yeah, I think the main takeaway when viewing the point by descending for any of the stats analysis sheets is the cards that aren't 1 point. It's very typically going to be filled with 1 point cards just because they're easier to slot into decks, and people will less frequently have to make big decisions between those cards. And so seeing an uptick of Walk and Lyris is notable. Minskinbu being the 3rd highest non-1 point card was pretty surprising to me, because that card hasn't really fit into any shells outside of Jun for a while. I believe the Teamer deck that made top 8 was playing it. And then we see people are willing to spend 3 points for White Plume, and they're still playing Flash, for example. So definitely keep an eye on it. The big takeaway from that particular side of this sheet is that Lutri has dropped off a cliff. Lutri had 4 copies. Previously, it was in the top 5 of point by descending. People were very, very willing to spend 3 points on Lutri, and our targeted pointing of Gush has dropped that play rate down. people are far less inclined to spend 4 points for Lutri and Gush when it's 5 points all of a sudden. So thankfully reduced the power level of that particular companion. Lurrus has a very different deck building restriction, so it's not something we're as worried about by any means. But Lutri dropping is the big takeaway from this event.
Definitely. Very nice. Very nice. Moving on, least played pointed cards, and this is where having a bigger data set actually gives you a lot of value because it keeps people off the zero, the like fabled zero number. I think it's okay to be a zero. Of course, not everyone gets to dance at the party, but I tell you, ones that are surprising. Actually, Library of Alexandria at zero is funny because Mouse has been doing the like, I want people to see how powerful it is, and so he like skews the numbers. So I guess it's just Mouse didn't go to this event, so Library of Alexandria at zero. Yeah, anything to say? Any call outs here?
I mean, all of these are pretty likely candidates for depointing at some point in the next couple of years. I think I have about 6 of these cards on my personal watch list, like Recall and TV. Those are the big ones. Imperial Seal, notably, still garbage. A complete absence of channel is about right. You're either going to see 1 or 2 pilots or 0 on any given day. Wish Claw still terrible. Time Twister still not something you can fit in. Oath is still very bad. I think out of the list of these cards that are at 0 copies, Library and Jet and maybe Ruby are the ones that you could see at a slightly larger event. And I wouldn't be surprised if the rest of them were at 0 for the next few events in a row. Like, that's just kind of how it is. People are either willing to put effort into TV or they're not because it's still 4 points. No one's going to be spending 5 points for Recall anytime soon, unless they really, really want to. So, yeah, these will be at 0 until something changes, whether it's community sentiment or someone decides to just register these cards, or a potential depointing or a reframing.
I mean, this is a delicate dance to play with the reserve list cards because we've seen in the past that if you accidentally make them the best way to spend your points, you get a lot of people upset being like, hey, I can't get this $6,000 card or whatever, you know? So it's like, it is a delicate dance to play. As someone who has a call in the family, not directly related, but it's nice to borrow one. I've tried A-Call in like 10 different decks and it's like, it's a pain. So it's funny that A-Call and Time Walk are basically the opposite ends of the spectrum. I think they're at comparable level, but I think it's just like a meta thing maybe, and it's just like, yeah.
I think I would disagree with that. I don't think they're comparable in power level in this particular format. I think Walk is very clearly the best card in the format, and I think Ancestral Recall is much closer to a lot of the 4 and 3 point cards in terms of gameplay aspect. Because of the way Magic has changed, exchanging resources and drawing 3 cards isn't as valuable as it used to be, because maybe you're facing the initiative and you actually need to get on the board. Maybe your opponent has played too many threats that'll just win the game. Maybe your opponent is just going to kill you. And Time Walk being so abusable is something that Recall doesn't have access to. Casting Recall every turn of the game doesn't actually do anything. Yeah, I think...
Yeah, okay. I see it.
I wouldn't be surprised if... I wouldn't be surprised if Wild Walk and Recall were at the same point value for Recall to see 0 play forever. I think that's just probably likely. And not something we can do anything about. Well, we can't do nothing about it, but it's not something we can do that much about that quickly.
Yeah. Well, I'll sell the A-Call and don't put it to 4. No, I'm just kidding. Moving on, of course, most played pointed cards in the top 8. Just last couple of slides on pointed cards. Force of Will at the top, Reanimator at the top, Psychic at the top. No surprises there, probably just a reflection of their position in the overall meta. Vampiric Tutor, funny that you mentioned Imperial Seal. Like, I don't think that Vampiric Tutor saw that much play, but I guess you can see it here with conversion rates. This is like, I don't know how much maths is actually going into this, but everyone in the room at the start of the day had a 9.9% chance of making top 8. So anything better than 9.9% chance may indicate that putting that card in your deck helps you get closer to the top 8. So Force of Will twice that, but that's like probably just because there's more of them in the room. Reanimates around the same one, and then Vampiric Tutor is like this funny outlier here because there's 4 people, half of them were in the top 8. It's pretty good conversion rate. But I'd probably just say that that's more pilots playing Reanimator specifically, because I don't know if Vampiric Tutor, maybe Flash plays it a little bit, but I didn't see too many of them.
Yeah, I think Vampiric Tutor has fallen into the Metamorphosis Fanatic camp. I don't believe it's seeing significant play outside of that archetype. And I know a couple of grinders are just like, we're in a combo metagame. There are a lot of different combo decks. Reanimator has the ability to punk people out a little bit better than others. Let's just ship it into that. But I don't think Reanimator has got a massive uptick because it's incredibly well positioned or anything. Like, people are playing 3 to 4 graveyard hate pieces in the main.
Yeah.
It's more that there are a bunch of different options in terms of trying to kill people, because obviously that is the current metagame that we're in. And you know, turn 1 and Doom is still very good. So
yeah, it's true. It's true. Most of the games that I won when I was playing it in the teams event was like when you just punk someone out on turn 2 or whatever. You're just like, that it usually involves Entomb, those kind of draws, but yeah, it was a rough crowd. I got hated out from every single angle, and I changed decks the next day. I was like, I'm pivoting, but yeah. I mean, it's probably a little bit of dice roll simulator, that deck as well. So like maybe just half of them made the top cut because they rolled well, you know. So yeah, not too much else, I think. This is, we've done this in a couple of times in a row. Basically, it's like how much has the play rate of a card dropped since it was pointed. So Fable the Mirror Breaker dropped 34 points in play rate because it was 54% of the meta. You know, every other deck was playing a Fable. Now it's moved down to 20%. So 20% of the people were playing Fable the Mirror Breaker. So I guess the bigger the number, the more you can extrapolate. I don't think that White Plume, the steady drop, is too much to worry about. I think the Gush steady drop, probably not too much to worry about. Tolarian Academy, I know that Tolarian Academy enjoyers complained about this, but this is like margin of error level 2.9% drop in playership since it's pointing. So people still probably think it's a good point, you know, because it's like, it's worth it. Flage obviously took a huge hit. Fable obviously took a huge hit. And yeah, Lutri, since threatening to put Lutri to 4, and you mentioned this at the start of the day, is like, because you like pointed Lutri Gush by pointing Gush, has also just steadily dropped the play rate. 7.3, and 7.3 is not too much, but it's actually just double. So it was like, I don't know how about that maths goes, like 13, 14%, drops down to 5%. So other than that, Demonic Council nearly doubled, I guess. Lots of people are playing combo, but that might have just been everyone's flavor of the day. They wanted to play a bit of combo.
Yeah, I think on this sheet, the main takeaways here are comparing the pointed cards that went from 0 to 1. So Fable, Frog, and Flage, you should be comparing against each other. Most people were willing to spend a point on Psychic Frog. Fable was more ubiquitous and still showed up in some amount. And I think Flage is the notable one here. Flage, while it was 0, was quite free-rolled, but very few people are willing to spend a point on it. And I think it's pretty clear in our other pointings, White Plume, Gush, and Tolarian Academy, they all dropped less than 10, because they were all already cards that people were spending points on that were very, very good, and for the most part, people are still willing to spend those points there. And then on the right-hand side, Fourth Earlinger's had a lot of cards around it pointed, so the archetype went down in favor, so it dropped its play rate. Lutri, again, Lutri Gush, that's the big one there. Demonic Council went up in play rate, and I think for the most part, that's kind of people pushing the boundaries. I think it had a very slow buy-in.
Yep.
People kind of just assumed that Council was good in Lurrus Breach, which it was, but the fact that it's showing up almost everywhere is, it's very good in Oracle, it's very good in Storm. We're getting to a point where, the card is very, very clearly worth playing at 0. And crop rotation has dropped from 5 to 3. I've said before that crop rotation is pretty close to unplayable at 1. And I think the community appears to be agreeing overall.
Welcome G Crouch in the chat. I totally agree. I think, I don't know. It's just like crop rotation, and like Tinker went down recently, so it's probably like a good indication of the value of sacrificing something to get a good effect, or sacrificing for a tutor. Is like it's kind of just fallen out of favor. Maybe tutors in general have fallen out of favor. I can say that, at least in the case of Demonic Council, that at RC7 there was actually just everyone wanted to play Mardu, and Mardu was like the hottest. It was like it's more than Grixis. There was Mardu players, so it's like people didn't want to play a combo deck where Demonic Council would be really good. So it's just, maybe it's just like people are noticing it more. So yeah, cool, interesting. Moving out of points and into regular stuff, we have most played non-lands at the events. You covered this in your video quite well. Mental Misstep still the top. It's funny, it's 87% is actually lower than usual. It's usually like pushing 90. And that's, we've all had our discussions about misstep pointing, and it's fine, it's sitting. No one, let sleeping dogs lie or whatever, but it says RC7 84% as well. So maybe this is just people aren't actually just free rolling it. They're deciding whether or not they want to pay the real estate, because yes, it has a low mana cost, but it does cost you a card in your deck. Anything here to point out? Anything interesting to you, Voltie?
Yeah, in terms of the main board cards, the sort of gimmies can kind of be ignored. We expect a lot of them. So the discard spells, the cantrips, the 1-mana removal spells, so Bolt, Push, Plow. If you ignore all of those and then look at the data, there's a couple of interesting things to note here. So Force of Will was more played than a bunch of different creatures and threats that were in the format, despite it being a point. Cameo was the most played creature and was more played than Preordain, which I think is a little terrifying. Lauren Revealed actually was higher than quite a lot of cards. And I think, we've shifted away from the Fury Fable most played mainboard cards that we had in a couple of different cycles. But then after Tameo as the most played creature, the next 3 are all black, and that is notable as well. So Baraglyph, Emperor of Bones, and Netherglyph, they all had 26, and I would be fairly confident in saying that the 26 pilots played all 3, and that they weren't spread across more than 26 decks.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly likely that that's how it broke down, but maybe not. Yeah, I think the fact that Tameo is so high is interesting, and then having 3 black threats over anything like Fury or Solitude or Noble Hierarch or any of these other unpointed creatures and whatnot. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's something that I've been thinking about and looking at.
Lots of Modern Horizon creatures. I think, I don't know, is some of it the Sheoldred effect? We saw Sheoldred and it was just like everyone's complaining about it, point it, and then it's just like, no, you actually just learned that it was a 4-drop that you could get rid of. It still dies to push and stuff, so like sometimes people get a little bit of like shell shock from a new powerful creature, and then it just rolls people. Like I've actually been rolled by Ajani a bunch of times, like I've been rolled by Ocelot Pride also a bunch of times, yeah, I think it's a little bit, you don't have to point them all, but it is interesting that Tameo has kind of broken away from her 3 compatriots in Baraglyph, Emperor Bones, and Netherglyph.
Yeah, I mean, not having, Ajani or Dragon's Rage Channeler, which was another very popular one. Not having any of those creatures make it. Very clearly, Dimir was one of the most played color combinations. And Tamio is showing up everywhere that blue cards are showing up, because that card is completely heinous.
Yeah.
And something that is kind of being ignored by people. I'm not entirely sure why. It's possible that it's just kind of innocuous and flying under the radar. To quickly deviate and answer a question from chat,
Yeah, go for it.
Mishra's Bauble versus Urza's Bauble, does it reflect 8-point no RL list? No, Mishra's Bauble is just better. And
Give me a second.
like Mishra's Bauble can give you essentially a scry if you look at your own top card and have a fetch land, and you can choose to shuffle it away or not. So if you're playing one Bauble, it should always be Mishra's Bauble. And so it's just a matter of how many people are playing two Baubles. And for the most part, we're not seeing two Baubles that often. There's just not that many decks that are profiting from having those. Ledger Shredder's fallen off a cliff. And yeah, I mean, if you're going to play a Bauble for something like Delirium or something like an easy spell check, or something to sacrifice with Beseech, then it's always going to be Mishra's Bauble. It's kind of as simple as that, Graham.
Yeah.
Nothing too interesting about it.
Not to say that Urza's Bauble isn't powerful, because checking what's in your opponent's hands is good, but I definitely agree that most of the time Urza's Bauble will be played when people are playing both. They just want an extra one of those effects. So it's like, it's very interesting, the Barragoyf, Emperor of Bones, Nethergoyf. I mean, I maybe not Emperor of Bones, but obviously these Goyf effects, they benefit from having extra artifacts, but it's just enough. Like, instant sorcery land creature is actually super easy to put into your graveyard, so having one loose Mishra's Bauble, and for some people like a Lotus Petal, is like enough. And then if, like, I guess people are just deciding they don't want to. Beauty. Well said. I agree with you. So moving on, so that was just individual cards, but for the rest of the day, we'll talk about archetype distribution. So this is just obviously how many different decks do we see in the room. And we can see here, combo did take up a larger share than usual, although I guess 29% is more than 25, which would be half, which would be a quarter. So control 15.4, but also more or less the same as how we usually see it. Midrange saw a downtick from RC, and combo saw an uptick, and aggro saw a downtick as well. So I think it was actually just both of them making room for the insurgence of combo, because we just had a lot of people playing combo. So there they are in comparison. Any other insights you think, Voltie, from this one?
Nothing major. I mean, the points change from Foundations did open up combo decks in terms of viability. A lot of the combo cards haven't been pointed, with the exception of Tolarian Academy and some decks. But for the most part, the pointing of the best mid-range threats, as well as the best value engine in Lucha Gush, means that, the mid-range decks have dropped off in power level. The aggressive initiative decks have dropped off in power level, which means that the combo decks like Reanimator and Storm, which were on the tier 1.5, tier 2 end, and being held down by the overall power of those decks, they've picked up in popularity. And I think that's mostly tied to their increase in win rate as well.
Yeah.
People are more willing to register combo if they think it's going to do better. And for the most part, we saw plenty of games end on turn 2. And I think that's fine, although the actual percentage being 29% is probably a little high.
Yeah, it's interesting. People complain more about combo and control than they do than mid-range and aggro as well, so it's a little bit of like sentiment, but yeah, I don't see anything too exciting, too influential. I guess keep an eye out for a combo, because it seems to be around. Not too much to say from me for this. This is our color pie sort of breakdown. It's just like what you mentioned before, is that white was good and now it's less good. Red is good and now it's less good. Although, yeah, only saw a little bit of a drop here.
Yeah, if you look at these two slides, the Grixis percentage overall is pretty much the same. Black changed by 0.2%, blue changed by 4%, red under 2. The big shift was from white to green, basically. White was almost double what green was, and now they're a bit more in line with green picking up a bit of popularity. For the most part, this is due to combo decks having access to an extra color for the most part. So Dimir Reanimator can very easily play a third color. Some of the Dimir midrange decks, which were traditionally Grixis, can be turned into Sultai. And Carpet of Flowers, Collector Oof, and Choke have seen a decent uptick in the sideboard play rate. And so yeah, people deviating very slightly from white to green. But if you look at the sheet itself, the Grixis color pie is pretty much exactly the same, and we expect that to continue.
Yeah, I agree. Over to our individual ones. Grain of salt warning, we do our best to name and categorize decks as we see them, although Highlander is a very singleton format and lots is open to interpretation. So let's go, I suppose. Some of this is, I've split them up into mid-range control combo, and then aggro split into tempo and stompy as well. So we can go through each of them very, very briefly, but yeah, this is the result of much communication into community and also between Voltie and us, Voltie and I as well. So it's like good to be on the same page about these sorts of things. And now we can enjoy the fruits of our labor. 24 mid-range decks, 38% of the total meta, 34% of the win share. So still pretty normal, I think. I think mid-range is just good. Lots of good cards around. Anything here worth mentioning?
No, not really. I mean, I think the shift in what the mid-range decks are is the notable thing. There was definitely more Grixis at the last couple of events, and we've pointed a bunch of those cards like Fable and Frog and Gush. People are picking up, Jund again, which is nice. And then we see down the bottom a couple of people who are spreading out a bit further. So Sultai, Grixis Green, Mardu Green, which were all, viable, but why would you bother? And now you kind of have the flexibility to make more interesting choices. Two teamer mid range, for example. Like I think there was one teamer player in the last event and 0 prior to that. Yeah, nothing too crazy. Mid range is kind of where it is at the moment.
You see the green influence here as well, of course. Nadu walks for the very first time the first mid-range combo deck. I'm sure there's been many more in the past, but Time Walk is also just an explore. You can also just cast it and get value off it very briefly to draw an extra card and put an extra land drop into the battlefield. But yeah, Nadu still at the top, Jund still at the top. I think this is like the no white that we're seeing before and extra green that we were seeing before as well. Moving on, combo decks, 23 of them in the room, 29% of the total meta as mentioned before, 24% of the win share, so probably still margin of error territory, I would say, but that's probably fine enough. What we didn't mention before is the 4 mid-range decks in the top 8 and 3 combo decks in the top 8, so the win share may be a little bit deceptive in that way, but yes, 3 combo decks, 2 reanimated decks and a breach deck with, of course, breach winning the whole thing, so not too much out of here. It's interesting to see Nadu in lots of different places, as I mentioned before. Anything here that looks cool to you?
No, I mean it's interesting that the combo decks are as varied as they are, and I think for the most part that'll be condensed going into CanCon in the next couple of events. People will work out what the best lists are. So for example, having a 3-3 split of World Gorger versus Not and Reanimator, I expect that to skew one way or another. The Flash Hulk deck, whether or not it should be playing Nadu, that'll probably condense as well. The Thoracle players, I believe, still haven't worked out a shell, given the new pointings and sort of how the metagame sits for them, but if they figure it out, there's probably going to be an uptick. So yeah, I think the main thing is that there are a lot of different combo decks in the room on this day, but I would expect that to be condensed pretty heavily for a bigger event
Yeah.
Next week.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see how it happens. Moving on, control decks, 15% of the total meta, 20% of the win share. This is probably the first time in a little while where control's had a positive win share. This looks fine to me. I mean, one of them, I mean, we often see shops, and again, contentious, blah, 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 about what shops actually is, because sometimes it does act like a mid-range deck, but I'm saying that you're putting extra effort into ramp, therefore you're putting extra effort into synergy, but this is fine. I don't mind this at all, and I like that people are trying different things in the control space as well.
Yeah, I don't expect the control decks meta share to jump anytime soon. Unfortunately, the best control deck is shops, and I think that win share is being carried by the shops pilots in the room.
Yes.
But that deck is prohibitively difficult to get into. Blue Moon players haven't figured it out yet as well, from what I can see. Just because Blood Moon is kind of quite bad at the moment. It's really poorly positioned. So, yeah, I mean, control decks moving forward probably going to drop off a little bit. I don't know that there's much we can do to help them with depointings or pointings, but you know, if we keep hitting some of the premier threats, then at the very least, people might be willing to suit up Cryptic Command and Archmage's Charm.
We'll see. Don't forget we depointed Mystic Sanctuary, and they should be very thankful for that. You know, Jace the Mind Sculptor recent depointing. Like, come on, what else would you want from us?
I don't know if recent is accurate. Wasn't it like 4 years ago? 5 years ago? That was ages ago.
Only 4 years ago. G Crouch raises something wonderful in the chat as well. We're about to move on to aggro, and I have put 2 bots decks in here. So, God, the line is so slim. But what I've decided is that like once you start casting 6, 7 drops, 8 drops that don't have improvise, and if your creatures are trying to attack, I'm going to call you an aggro deck. And we had one that was my deck that was like dedicated affinity. I'm talking Memnite, I'm talking Ornithopter. And we had another person that was like mono blue, but kind of topped out at Urza. So I was like, okay, some people are caring more about putting creatures on the battlefield. Some people are Mishra's Workshop decks, and some people are Tolarian Academy decks, you know. It just depends on how you want to play your artifacts. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoy that. Yeah, it's sad because I think in a perfect world we might even have bots different to affinity, because there's also like the 3-drop version, that's kind of thing, but like we don't have to go too deep in it. But yeah, I did think that at one point shops, bots, affinity, like it's actually colorless is just a color now, you know, so it's like those are just those color decks, but of course you can do anything you want with colorless artifacts, you know. Very nice. Yeah, anything. I mean, positive win share for Stompy decks. Negative win share for tempo decks. Pure aggro was also, yeah, not negative win share for pure aggro decks. It didn't really look like it was aggro decks day. But yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts about that? Any causes, you think?
I think it's definitely the resurgence of Reanimator as one of the premier combo decks. It kind of shuts out the Sprowers decks and some of the Stompy decks. When your opponent is trying to put Tendrils on the stack for 20, you can race them. If your opponent is planning on putting a Traxxer into play and just riding it to victory, she'll just do that and she'll just kill you.
Yeah.
And you won't be able to do anything about it. So, yeah, I think probably the biggest factor here, well, the biggest 2 factors I would say, is that the fast mana decks have gone bigger and with more creatures that are able to actually rumble on the board state. And, you know, that turns off the Stompy plan of playing a Blood Moon on turn 2, because, you know, your opponent can just play creatures. And then, yeah, the fact that one of the best things to be doing right now is putting large lifelinking creatures into play.
Yeah.
Price of Progress is looking pretty rancid when your opponent's on 40.
Yes. Yeah. Also, your opponent has 2 lands. You know. Also, Valgavoth is like, honestly, I've played it a bit, and it kind of eats aggro up. I mean, they're probably the only archetypes that are the archetypes best suited to getting rid of a Valgavoth because they can pay the ward cost. But like, one hit, and if you can't get rid of it, and God help you if I accidentally daze your kill spell, like, it can be just over. But just I agree that like adding a giant lifelinking threat to the mix definitely stifled the win rate of these aggro decks.
Yeah, I mean, when it was like Grizzlebrand and Archon, that was very beatable, and now it's a Traxxas and Valgavoth, and it's just not.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's much anyone can do about it from the aggro side of things. Like, you can play your Caracas, but it's not going to save you.
Yeah.
You can play more counter magic, maybe more graveyard hate, but at that point, should you just be playing Grixis? And yeah, you get into cycles for sure.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, sometimes it's just like you just lose game one and then you just quickly side in 10 pieces of graveyard hate and kill them. So it's like, I think a little, yeah. So there's a little bit of natural rock, paper, scissors happening with the archetypes. And yeah, I think it's still beatable, you know, it's like, it's not the end of the day for aggro, not at all. Moving on to 8 points, we've had the accessibility rule around for quite a while. One deck was accidentally an 8-point list, did not have any reserved list cards, but was still 7 points. So I thought it was probably a good idea to reach out to everyone and say, don't forget, if you're not playing any reserved list cards in your deck, you are entitled to 1 extra point, and it's entitled the 8-point rule. So unfortunately, that's the best news for 8-point lists of the day. Terrible win share. Terrible win share. A little bit of like new player effect is like the really polite way to say that people's first events, they're more likely to bring an 8-point list than a 7-point list because it's the ones that they made with their friends. Yeah, I think the people who are usually here, sometimes yourself included, of people who like are grinders who are playing 8 points, I think maybe is perhaps missing from this list.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine I was probably in the top 3 8-point performers at every event I played since I started doing that. But at the same time, you know, like 8-point decks are weaker, and part of the drop is always going to be that. Yes, the newer players will almost certainly be playing 8 points. Any budget players, so for example, Kane down in 51st, I know that they were playing a slightly upgraded $75 budget deck of mine.
Nice.
And you know, 51st at 81st is not the worst result.
No,
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's one of those things where I think part of the factor of the drop here is that the initiative decks got pointed a bit. And Fable, like Fable being an 8th point is fine, but you used to get that for free and you used to get a more impactful 8th point.
Yeah.
And so now that those areas have been condensed and the initiative package is a bit more expensive, we're seeing a little bit of a shift away from that in the 8-point space. You can see, you know, a fair amount of blue decks in here.
Yeah. Yeah, it could also just be the role of the archetype dice as well. I mean, like aggro, 53% of the archetypes chosen that day for 8-point players, and aggro just got walloped, you know, and like really high percentage of red decks, but those red decks had to give up Fable, you know, so it's like there are some contingency, there's some variables at play here, I think, but yeah, worth keeping an eye on, I suppose. Moving on and wrapping up for our second last slide, if you have any questions brewing in your mind, or you just want to ask the data a question, because we have access, of course, to these data spreadsheets, you're welcome to keep them in mind as we go through this last slide of top 8 finishes in the last 6 events. This is from, you see them on the screen, POG Winner Library, GG Winner Duel, Regional Championships, POG Winner Duel, Canberra. So these are like still very like East Coast heavy, you know, you have the Highlander belt down here, and it's, I want to start seeing some South Australia. So I think I'll start advocating for traveling for a premier event in Adelaide sometime soon, because it's like, it'd be nice to flesh out these locations. But yeah, not too much to say about the top 8 finishes from the last six events. Uh, it is kind of representative of as well of the like other decks meta that we showed before of like 49% or whatever, because like half of these decks are ones, so it's like still very possible to bring a rogue deck and be successful.
Yeah, I mean, nothing stands out too much here. Worth noting that across these last 6 events, I believe we're on 3 different point spreads, pre-strip mine and then pre-foundations. However, in saying that, a lot of the finishes and a lot of the deck archetypes in the events that have occurred over this period have looked pretty similar anyway. People are just kind of willing to play blue and black cards.
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, next couple of events should give us a bit more to work off.
Yeah, no Boxing Day stats, Mr. Verbal. I think from memory, actually, it was just kind of a low turnout, but I think neither of us were there as well. And sometimes it's, of course, this is like, we make content and it's all fun and stuff as well, but it's like a lot of hours go into stuff. So when people, yeah, we share it the way we can. So yeah, we'll see how that one goes in the future. But looking forward, Volties Fight Nights, if you haven't already joined it, please do 17th, 19th. So tomorrow is the next one. Friday night, you can join Volties Fight Nights on MTGO. Coming up very soon, very, very, very soon, 24th, 25th, 26th, is ACT Day, ACT weekend. So come down for the National Cornhole Championships. There's information on the 7 Point Highlander page. Just a barbecue, just come and enjoy if that tickles your pickle, and find out whether or not Rashad, World Highlander Champion and National Cornhole Champion for 2024, big year for him, he will be fighting to maintain the Golden Corn. So good luck to him and his teammate from Queensland. 7 Point Side event on the Saturday, National Highlander Championships on the Sunday. And I'm very pleased to announce also that Let's Play Games are going to be doing it. This is professional. This is not me with my 5 webcams trying to make it work on duct tape and string. This is like, it's going to be serious business. So we have Jimbo on the known commentator as well on the coverage team, and also Mr. Lee, 7 Point content creator as well. So it's going to be, we're going to miss you very deeply, Voltie, and you'll be a missing face from the crew. But it's going to be a really huge event, and I'm very excited to be catching that on Sunday. So if you are there on Saturday, please come and see me. The booth will be open, and you'll have the opportunity for a couple of pre-recorded footage opportunities. So we're going to slice in some information from Saturday that we procured on Sunday that we procured from Saturday. So if you would like to come and get interviewed for a deck tech, find me at CanCon at Exhibition Park in Canberra. If you would like to come and do Cards on Parade, which is going to be a very exciting, take a photo of your very expensive blinged out deck, and we'll gush over it on live on Sunday. And otherwise, we'll have a community Q&A as well. So check out the 7 Point Highlander Facebook page. There's a Google form up there. If you want to ask the committee members anything, please send a Google form link, and we'll send it off to our people. And we will have some committee members on ready on Saturday. So if you want to come and check that out, please do. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be fun. Yeah. So yes, exactly. Sorry. There's opportunities for questions and comments. If anyone wanted to jump in and say anything, you have committee member here, of course, Voltie, ready to answer any curly questions. And I'm here as well to vamp if needed. But yes, what is up in the Voltie YouTube world as well?
Yeah, so the POG events will be uploaded soon. As I said earlier, I did a re-record for commentary for the matches that we could only get video footage on. That was the bulk of the last 2 weeks for me. So those are being spliced together, and they'll be uploaded soon. The Voltie Fight Night series is up and running in 2025. We have an event tomorrow and another one on Sunday if you want to play those. But those VODs also get updated and put onto YouTube as well. So if you go to my YouTube channel at the moment, like 90% of it is just commentated matches. If that's your thing, you should watch all of them. If it's not, you should watch all of them. And you should hit that subscribe and bell button. There's more educational content being written at the moment, so keep an eye out for that. Realistically, it'll probably be after the CanCon points update, just because, we're a little bit short on time and there isn't much that we need to push for the community at the moment. Otherwise, you can check me out on Twitch. I'm also on Twitch here. I don't know if you have a link to that, Angus, but that's all good. You guys can find me. It's not that hard.
I'll put it in the show notes on our YouTube channel, but of course that's twitch.tv/Voltie the Gamer. Am I right?
I believe so.
Okay.
I think it might be Voltie Games.
Okay.
Yeah, Voltie the Gamer is the YouTube.
That's right. Okay.
And I'm saving up to buy those two URLs as just Voltie. Yeah. When I can find out what random bot from South America has them.
Right. Yes. Looking forward to that. Yes, that's wonderful. There's lots of content coming up in the future and lots of games to be played. Misk Man the Man, gotta get a retro board at Grizzlebrand before CanCon, I guess. Yes, this is the time to play Grizzlebrand. Do it for me. Bring back the glory of Grizzlebrand to the CanCon event. G Crouch tried Key and Wheel during the MTG All Access. It's impossible to win in time if your opponent makes you play it out. You've seen this deck before, Voltie. I'm sure just take out all the win cons. We can win with Memory Jar. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think the difference between paper and Moto deck lists for combo, that doesn't just exist in other constructed formats. If you're playing Moto and you're playing 7-point and you're trying not to run out of time, maybe you should reevaluate some of the deck slots and actually kill people. I know a lot of people were willing and signed up to do like Nadu endurance loops early days, but when you have singletons of all of those cards and you have to scrounge together infinite mana, it's just kind of rancid, and you should probably put something in the deck that wins the game on the spot.
Yeah, I see it. For the best solitaire players out there, if you do not want your opponent to play with you but rather watch you play, if anyone doesn't have any other questions, if you have any questions, speak now, forever hold your peace. You can watch this later at youtube.com/CBRMTG. You can find us on Twitch, that's twitch.tv/CBRMTG. There's a Discord, find us on there. Good night, G Crouch, have a wonderful time. You can find us on there. 7-Point Highlander is a wonderful format. You should check it out. You can find it at 7pointhighlander.com.au. Find us next week at Let's Play Games YouTube channel. Thank you, Zwok, as well. Yeah, you can catch us live for the National 7-Point Highlander Championship for 2025. It's going to be a doozy, so come, enjoy, watch. Thank you very much, Voltie, for joining me. Anything else to say out to the crowd before we sign off?
No, I mean, I'll be sad to miss next week, but in saying that, we have a very good coverage team set up to go for CanCon, and it's a big event, so at the very least, if you're not going or you're not attending, you should be tuning in and watching it. Angus is great, and all of their content. Click those links. Seriously. You hear it all the time, but if you go to my YouTube channel and my Twitch and Angus Twitch, and you hit follow on Twitch or subscribe on YouTube and hit the bell icons, it helps us, it helps you. 2025 is going to be the year of 7-point content. I'm fairly confident. I'm going to be pushing for it. I know Angus is going to be pushing for it. And there are other people lurking in the deeps, I'm fairly confident, who are waiting for their moment. So, this format's great, and if you want to see more of it, you should make it possible for yourself to do that.
That's right. What a great year for us. Here's to another wonderful year of 7-Point Highlander. Thank you very much, Voltie, for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you next time.
Catch you later, gang.